when you look back, what will be some of the things that girls and wife that you say, this was a good blessing? I'm glad I got to experience it.
Well, getting raised in a pastor's home was really good for us.
You're still being raised.
Well,
you're 11.
Well,
She's like, now that I'm on my own and, and a YouTube
I
star.
never said that.
I make my own
Okay,
income.
but
Wombly womble.
And welcome once again to another edition of Footnotes. Pastor Mark here, and today I have to be on my P's and Q's, Timothy. I actually have to be behaved because in the studio are the three women in my life, my wife and my two daughters, Lacy and Savannah. Welcome, family. We're missing our boys, but you are here, and the subject we're talking about today is all in the family. Pastors have families. That can be good, that can be bad. And there's challenges, and that family goes along with the pastor's ministry. So I thought it would be a good idea, and we may regret this, of opening up our lives to the public and saying, let's talk about what it means to be in the family of a pastor and the home of the pastor, and what that looks like, what it involves. Maybe it will encourage the church body. Our family's not much different than yours. And then maybe also it will encourage you on how to pray for your pastor and how to encourage the family and to see the benefit of it all. So, guys, welcome, or gals, welcome to the podcast. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
yeah,
We're excited.
Okay, they're all a little timid.
Well, no, it's just like you're talking about stuff, so.
Okay.
No, like you're introing, so we have to be like quiet.
That's right. Well,
So.
to a degree, yeah. So, guys, gals, I'm going to say guys. Sorry, guys, gals, dolls. We're going to frame our discussion today, all in the family, around 3 points. And we're going to talk about, first of all, behind the scenes of the pastor's home. Now, we do have the power to edit. Behind the scenes.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. We're going to let people into the home. Then we're going to talk about the balances that often we have to pursue as a family, particularly my kids, because, Lacy, you've experienced this probably the most. You felt like there's the balance of the fishbowl life and then just being a normal teenager. And then we're going to talk about not only the balances, but the blessings. There's a lot of blessings to being in a pastor's life and home, and you're part of it. And so we want to just explore all those together. So let's get into it. Number one, let's go behind the scenes, guys. Pastor's home. Oh, gosh, Lacy, you've been in other people's homes. How would you rate the pastor's home that you live in?
Like scale of 1 to 10.
I guess. I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding. I think our family's pretty normal. I think we have we're goofy and stuff, and we get in fights, but every family does that, you know. Like, I feel like you realize that a lot more too when you go into other people's homes and you see oh, that wasn't so crazy of our family, because every family does it, you know. And it's every siblings get in fights and all that. It's just normal stuff. But
yeah, I used to think that you guys, as you were growing up, thought that we were so abnormal. We would go on a road trip and everybody would end up fighting on the road trip in the car over the seat, or he touched me, or his leg is on my arm. And
they still do that.
They still do that even as teenagers. And the good news is they, in all of that, realize other people do that too. So they realize, we're pretty normal. I don't know. So what is it like? What does it look like behind the scenes in a pastor's home?
I think that y'all encouraged us to read our Bibles, and you made an intentional time, or tried to make an intentional time of family worship every week. But I know we talked about this once, Dad, where it was you were talking about one of the famous preachers, and I think I was talking about how I was kind of grateful that y'all didn't push it on me too much to like, oh, you have to read your Bible every day. Like, y'all let me figure that out for myself and like come to the Lord on my own terms. You never forced me to do that. You never forced me to read my Bible. Of course, you encouraged it and you like read me Bible stories when I was little, but you never made me do it. And I think that made my love for Christ and my relationship with him so much more genuine. And I was able to find that on my own. And I was just grateful for that. And I was grateful for the intention that you put in it, but not forcing me to do it. So I like that.
The story you mentioned, I told you this once when you were younger. I remember, and Amanda, you remember this. We were at the old house, and Lacy just was honest. She said, I'm doubting. How do you know the Bible is real? And how do you know Jesus is real? And normally a parent would hear that and they would freak out and they would feel like, well, I've got to defend and I've got to convince. But I had just read a biography on Francis Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer was a man who moved to Switzerland and opened a house in the 60s for hippies called L'Abri Fellowship. A great thinker, incredible thinker. And if you've never read anything by Francis Schaeffer, you should. And Schaeffer had a daughter, just like I had you, and I had just read this story where the daughter was saying that she doubted God. So in the midst of this whole house that invited all these skeptics to come in and talk about theology in Switzerland, this daughter was doubting God. And she said, my dad came to my bedside, and he didn't chastise me for questioning. He didn't chide me. He didn't say, well, you shouldn't believe that. And he didn't even defend the gospel. He just simply looked at me and he said, that is a great question that you're asking. And I want you to know that I want to help you think through that question and pray for you. And so, do you remember this conversation, Amanda? Do you remember this night?
I remember this night like it was yesterday. And I am the freak out, got to defend. That was in the flesh. That was my go-to. And Mark and I have talked about this, but I think we balance each other really well because I would lead more toward legalism.
Well, you're more rules
based, yes,
and that's good. We need that.
And you're very much more on the grace side of that spectrum. But I think together it works really well because that night you taught me a lot. About how to respond to that. I remember listening at the door. I don't know if y'all know I was listening at the door, but I was listening at the door kind of calmly freaking out in my heart and watching how you helped her navigate through that situation. And I learned a lot that night from you. So,
and basically, Lacy, exactly what you said. I just said, well, let's pray about that and let's think about that. And you liked that because I didn't push it on you. Mm-hmm. But you came around.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two types of child as well. Like I think I've always been kind of more independent and I've always wanted to, like, if someone tells me, oh, you can't do that, like, I'm more determined I want to do that. You know what I'm saying? And that's partly a sinful nature, obviously. But I think the way that you handled that was a reason why I was able to come to the faith and still like welcome that in my own life because you never forced it upon me. Because I feel like if you had forced it upon me, I would have run away from it, you know? And I think that's kind of everyone. Like if you force something on someone, they're not gonna receive that well. Some people will, but some people won't, and that's opposite reactions. But I think the way, and I remember that night too, I remember like I was dealing with the idea of death and like, is it even real? Like you don't know what's gonna happen, and I couldn't control that anymore, and you just telling me like it's going to be okay, you'll figure this out, but I'm not going to force you to figure it out right now, like I'm going to help you through it, was what helped me to be able to come back to the faith and come back to God and not just immediately have that instinct, that selfish sin nature instinct to run away from it. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a really, really good parenting point, and I think I learned a lot from you in that and how to handle situations like in my future. And I think that was a very good teachable parenting moment.
Well, I don't always do that well, and you'll have to pray for me because there's other times, where Dad wants to rush in and solve the problem and fight the fight. And then there's other times when I can say, That's a good question. Let's think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pray through that. So we don't always do that perfectly. All right, that's one aspect of a pastor's home. We didn't force it down your throat. In fact, Savannah, to get you in on this part of the conversation, you wanted to be baptized for a long time, and Dad wouldn't do it. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And why? What? Was it because Dad was mean?
No. At the time, I was like, he's kind of mean for not letting me get baptized. But in reality, I wasn't saved, and Dad knew what was best for me, and he didn't want me to get baptized just to get baptized because all my friends were getting baptized, and because I thought it was cool. He wanted me to actually know the Lord, and I thought that was really nice of him.
Well, I'm so glad you thought it was nice of me, Savannah.
I thought it was nice of him.
I thought it was nice. Very nice of you to do that.
That's great. Good
Well,
job.
and you got baptized this past year.
I did.
And you were 12 years old.
11.
11
no, wait,
years.
10.
10 years old.
She's only 11 now.
Okay. Yeah, honey, you know I'm horrible with numbers. And
Mark's
so-
math.
Wait, you're 11, Savannah?
Mark's
You're
math,
11?
you're
She
45.
just said she was 11?
She was 45 when we baptized her as a child.
As a child.
And but no,
Bruh.
you were what, 10 or 11?
I was
so
10.
10.
October,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that you had plenty of time to see that the gospel was real and that there was some, understanding of the gospel. And you worked patiently for 2 years with me. And some people would say, oh, that's horrible. I mean, your child professed faith. Well, I never said you didn't profess faith, right? I just said when you make this public, baptism doesn't save you. But when you make this public, I want you to know that this is the truth. And so, yeah, we didn't try to rush you into that. Do you think, and you don't know, but I'm just asking you kind of rhetorically, do you think other pastors' families feel pressure to produce within their own family converts and my kids are all saved and blah, blah, blah? Or do you think, no, they're like ours?
I think absolutely they feel pressure. I think ours is pressure, like the pressure's on us too, but I think it's kind of like stereotyped in that way. But I think as a pastor, you're kind of put on a pedestal of like purity and like knowing the gospel. And so when your children kind of turn out, I feel like the public thinks about that and they're like, oh, they must have done something wrong, but they're the people that we look up to, so, but I feel like that shouldn't be there, I don't think, because it's not really, it might not be all the parenting pastor's fault, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, and, there's some basis for that in Scripture where Paul tells, Timothy and Titus, if a man can't manage his household, he can't be a pastor. Mm-hmm. But that talks about managing the household. So I've got to be able to manage. I don't think it ever says you have to be a believer. Now, some people would take the Titus passage, but that I don't think that's what that means. I think it means that as long as you're in our house, you're not, fighting against the gospel, denying the gospel under my management and under my watch. But no pastor can make their kids believe. Only the Holy Spirit can do that. Mm-hmm. And there's no guarantee the Holy Spirit is going to save. You know what I'm saying? So, our prayer for you has been that you would know Christ and be saved. And we've prayed that from an early age. And God's been gracious so far, but we do our best, to present the gospel. But I do think there's probably that pressure. What do you think, Mom?
Yeah, I think one area where there is that expectation is just like Sunday morning church. I remember when the kids were little, I felt like everyone was watching and there was an expectation that the pastor's kids need to sit still, they need to listen, they need to behave, they need to be obedient. And one thing I would just say about our whole family is we're really no different from any other family. We're humans, we're sinful, we just are under kind of a different calling. But there were days, I remember one Sunday in particular where we marched all four of them in your office after church and they all four got a spanking.
I remember that.
I feel like I remember that too. I don't think that was a good day for the kids.
They were so bad. This was when they were little. They were so bad in church and I saw it and you dealt with it. And I think that's true. We didn't have children's church at our last church. So when our kids were 0 to about the youngest one being 8 years old or somewhere in there, they had to sit in church. And Mom Now, we had nursery, but up until 4 years of age. But once they got to kindergarten and they were able to sit through school, the idea was we need to start training them to sit through church. And that was kind of the whole church, wasn't just us. But that was hard on you as a mom, because the expectation from some people was that some of the kids should never wiggle and move, because that's the pastor's family. And then others, as well, you were really a single mom in the pew.
Yes.
Because I was in the pulpit, so I couldn't be down there as a dad grabbing our rambunctious little boy and saying, please stop moving around or I'm going to take you out and spank you, or whatever I have to do. I'm going to take you out and we're going to deal with this. I couldn't do that. So oftentimes you had to be the single mom on the pew doing that. But God sent people into your life to help you. And this is where the church could help any mother, but you could also help pastors if they had little kids.
Yeah, I remember a couple of Sundays I thought if I didn't have to come back, I wouldn't. I mean, those were some really difficult Sundays. Not every Sunday, but it was the perfect storm where all 4 of them were in a bad mood or whatever, or hungry or tired. And I remember thinking, if I was a single mom who just walked in here with 4 kids, I would not come back. But God did graciously send me help. And that looked like a lot of different things. My mom was good about, if I had one in the nursery, she'd go pick up the baby while I handled the other ones. And just some young teenage youth that came and kind of attached to different ones of our kids, and just helped me get them from the church even just to the minivan with all the bags. And so
because I was behind shaking hands. People want to tell you all kinds of random stuff after the sermon. And so they, that's their access time. And you were always so good, I thought, to say that is your job and your calling. And you would always tell me, I remember this specifically, I don't know if you do, but you would say that's their time of access to you. They work. They're not going to come up here Monday morning, to just tell you something. And so you need to be there.
Right.
And you need to stand there, and I will take the kids. And that was a ministry that you did for the pastorate.
Right.
Whether they realize that or not, you took that on. But like you mentioned, I just remember Abby, who was a teenager. She would go get Landon and
Anna and Savannah.
And also
Anna would get Savannah. That's right.
Also
and
Mammy and Pappy.
Mammy and Pappy, who were not related to us, but they took us under their wing and they said, you're going to be our grandkids. And they sat with Amanda every Sunday. And
They
Pappy
would bring us little coloring toys, coloring sheets, all that. So we would sit still.
Candy.
Peppermint.
I remember
Candy.
Mammy would show up on like Valentine's Day week or something, and like we'd be sitting in the pew with them two, with Mammy and Pappy, because, well, I think it helped a lot because with Mom, she had to go with like Savannah or something, drop her off in the nursery. So we'd always sit with them, and we'd be still with Mammy and Pappy because Pappy would joke.
Perfect.
He'd be like,
they behaved perfectly with them.
And Mammy and Pappy thought our kids did no wrong. And every time we'd go pick them up, we'd say, were they good? And they'd say, oh, they never do anything bad. And I'd say, well, there must be different kids.
well, she gave us whatever we wanted,
Yeah.
though. We'd ask her for a popsicle, here's 15 of them.
Right.
And then we'd be
Every
sitting on
time-
the swing just completely content because we had popsicles,
But during the service, I remember to keep one of our little boys still, Pappy would bring $1.
That was Landon, yeah.
And he would give the $1 to Landon and say, now, when they pass the plate, you put that in.
And he had to fill out the envelope.
And he had to fill out the envelope, and
That was a big deal.
When we
Something
went to
they
their
looked
house,
forward
they
to.
would just load it. They would bring out all these big like Walmart sacks full of like cotton candy and all these board games, and we would all get just tons of stuff, and it like helped us not be distracted during the service.
Best grandparents ever.
Best grandparents ever.
Not even real
even
biological
related.
grandparents.
No,
Well,
but
and
she would show up on Sunday and like she'd just have a bag full of like candy or peppermints, and that was just, it got us quiet like that. And it didn't have to do much, but
and think there's probably some person in the congregation right now, and there's some mother struggling to get here on Sunday and thinking, if I didn't have to, I'm not coming back. And they don't have to.
Right.
So they don't come back. But if somebody would say, hey, I'd love to sit with you and your children and just try to help, just try to be there for you, just tremendous. And even if teenagers would say, I'm going to stop looking at myself and I'm going to think about, is there a mom that I could go pick the baby up for them or hold a baby while they go get the other one in nursery? I mean, so many little things that can be done to minister in the body of Christ. I hope that encourages somebody to do that. And so you guys always had help at church, but we were a normal family, and our kids had to get spankings, and our kids argued and fussed and fight.
All the time.
I had a guy in my discipleship group, and I won't name him, but he said to me, I was a little leery coming over into your discipleship group because I thought that you would be so different from me and my family, but I've come to realize that you're just a normal person like everybody else, and that was so encouraging to me. I've intentionally tried to downplay myself. I don't want to be the almighty pastor who never did wrong, who walked on water. I've told the church my flaws. Even in my illustrations that are funny, it just shows imperfection and vulnerability and sincerity. I'm not perfect. You didn't get that guy. But you didn't get that guy on purpose, because I don't think that's biblical. I don't think that's biblical.
One thing I've heard feedback on your preaching for years is your transparency. People like that because they relate to that, even though sometimes I'm gripping the pew going, that feels a little too transparent for me, but no, most of the time it's good. But people like that. They want to feel like they can relate to their pastor and in his weaknesses, strengths, sin, struggles.
Somebody got me a mug for Christmas, and it said, you better be careful or you'll end up in my sermon illustration.
That is true.
It's like warning as a pastor,
you-
anything you say or do can end up in my sermon.
That's right. So you guys are normally the brunt of that. Have you ever resented any illustration that I've ever given about you, or what do you think? I try to ask you, but I don't always get around. I ask your mom, can I say that? Or can I tell that story? But I don't know. What do you think?
I do remember one that went south. You want me to share it?
That was back in Texas.
Went south.
Because I was saying that you're going to say this. I know already. I was saying I have one child that builds and one child that likes to destroy.
That one didn't go south.
Well,
It
it
did.
did because it negatively painted one child as the destroyer. And then what did everybody in the church do? They all I know who's the destroyer. And,
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the little guy felt like,
And
he was the
little.
bad guy.
Yeah.
And they were casting him as the bad guy.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be so hard, though. I mean, it's kind of ironic because we went on our first date about 20 years ago today. Oh. Did you know that?
Oh, that's right. And where did we go? Let's tell everybody. We went to Memphis Pizza Cafe.
Yes.
And then we went to Playhouse on the Square. And we saw the Spitfire Grill.
Yeah.
And we fell in love.
And that night, after our first date, we stopped by a church that your dad was going to start pastoring the next day, because this was a Saturday night. Sunday morning, it was going to be his first day at this new church. It was his first time to be a senior pastor or pastor of this church, and we just knelt and prayed over that church. And I was saved just a few years before that, and I felt like I had a specific calling on my life to be a pastor's wife, and I didn't know why, but I always felt that from the time I was saved. And so when I met your dad, he actually wasn't a pastor. He was the spiritual life director of SBEC. And on our first date, he told me that he was now going to be a pastor, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And she would always sign, and you still do, her letters. I've got a lot of them, or her notes or whatever. She would sign by your side. So your mother would always say, I'm by your side.
That's so sweet.
That is so cute.
Well, I brought that up to say, so for 20 years, almost to the day, you've been my pastor, and I have listened to your sermons and only your preaching. And, I've seen people kind of, when you speak for a living, obviously you're going to say things that are wrong, or maybe you wouldn't have said like that, but there's no editing a Sunday morning sermon. When it comes out, it's out there. And I've watched people kind of nitpick, and I mean, that was probably something he would have said differently. It kind of came across as like, oh, this kid is being labeled as like the destroyer, even though he often did. Like Micah would build the Legos,
and then Landon would come along and destroy them.
But but a lot of that is just being a little boy in the age that he was. But when you speak for a living, it's difficult. I would love to see people have just grace with that, and that you're gonna say things that maybe you would have said a little bit differently. And I see sometimes people are very gracious, and other times people are just kind of like waiting to like pounce on any wrong thing and just kind of like ready to attack. And I just wish people would think, what if that were me? What if somebody was listening to everything I said, and if I ever made a mistake, they were. So I think that's something that your dad struggles with and deals with that a lot of people don't know about.
Well,
back to the thing, I think Savannah and me never cared about if our illustrations were putting, because we grew up with it, so it was just kind of like, as time went on, it got to be funny.
Let's be clear. Savannah told me not long ago, Dad, you have not used me in a sermon lately, and so
he still hasn't.
And so I'm going to need you to use me in a sermon.
Hey, I think this week is our next week. She needs to be in one.
There's only really one of our kids that doesn't want to be in the sermon illustration,
and that's okay.
We'll let y'all figure out which one that is.
You probably I told
he's getting better about it.
He is.
He's getting better about it.
He really is, but yeah.
I tell my dad and my mom all the time, I'm like, I want my husband to be just like Dad, because I want to marry a pastor.
Where did
and
that
I
come
feel
from?
like Dad is just such a good husband to my mom.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
you're so sweet.
That's true.
You're
I
gonna
never
get a kiss.
knew. I never knew Mom signed your thing with by your side. That is
That's
like
so
precious.
sweet.
That is so
Aw.
precious.
Yep. And she's
That is
been
so
by
cute.
my side as the pastor's wife for, 20 years this year. 20 years this year. And we were married at Broadway.
Yep.
So we should reenact it all.
Well, we do have that video from our wedding if we could find it.
I found it in the attic the other day.
Did you really?
Yeah, but now how do you play a VHS?
Timothy.
Timothy?
No,
Do you know how to-
not the VHS. The one that we played at our wedding. It was on a DVD. The
Oh.
interviews.
Yeah, that's somewhere, I'm sure. Yeah.
Somewhere.
I'll
That's
get that to
somewhere.
Timothy
We'll
on
find it.
our 20-year anniversary.
But now, how do you play a DVD?
Oh, that's kind of
Everything's
true. I didn't even
streaming.
think about that.
Do it on the Xbox. You can do it on those.
Yeah, so
Timothy can do anything.
Timothy can do anything.
He's got it.
So, bottom line is, pastor's home. What's it like behind the scenes? We're normal like everybody else. We're imperfect like everybody else. Let's talk about the balances, because there are negatives, and you have to balance. And Lacy, you and I have talked about this a lot, because when we moved here, and it's not a slight to here, but we moved into a situation that was more fishbowl than ever, because we have a school that's on our property that sees us. They see us all the time, everything that, because you all go to school. Teachers know you. Students know you that don't even go to our church. They know who you are. And then, you have a church that's really good and loves us. But I don't know. What are the balances that you've had to learn? And are they fair? Are they any different from anybody else? What about a kid who is a teenager who says, well, my mom is a teacher at the school. I feel like I'm under a fishbowl as well. What do you think?
I vividly remember, I think this was my first day of school ever at North Point, and I remember I came in and I was so nervous. I was like on the verge of tears, and my teacher opens up. She's like, oh, we have a new student, and her dad's the pastor at Broadway. And like, no offense, they were just trying to welcome me, but I think that kind of like everybody immediately stereotyped me as like the pastor's kid. And so if people ever like did anything, they were like, oh, you can't do that around her, like, like it kind of put me in this corner where I couldn't really relate to people as much because of the fact. And I started to dislike that a little bit, because I was like, oh, like they're putting me on this pedestal, and like they think that all of this stuff about me, and then if I ever do anything, people will be like, oh, she's not as innocent as she seems. Like there's just people who are always trying to say something about it, and I didn't like that at first, but I think I've grown like one of my main things this whole year is balance. I'm trying to figure out how to balance my entire life. But one of the things that I've been learning about that is just don't care about people who are going to say things that don't matter. Because, like, it's hard because you stand, especially me, because I do praise team and things like that. And I think it's hard because people look at you and you have so much pressure to be this certain version of, like, a perfect version of yourself. But that's not true. That's not reality. And it's hard when people see that it's not reality. And then you're like, oh, well, what are they going to think of me when I'm saying? They're going to think it's not genuine, but it is. Like, I'm just a sinner. I just make mistakes. But I think what I've learned for balance is just don't let what other people say about you affect you, because in the end, the only thing that determines your worth and what you stand for is Christ, and you can't let other people affect that. You can't listen to that. And then also, you just have to be like, you can't put the pressure on yourself. You have to say, everyone makes mistakes. It's okay that I'm not perfect, but here is me. Like, I think also kind of what you were saying about, like, showing your flaws to people. Like, that's okay. You have to show your flaws to people, and they'll eventually learn to respect you for that. But yeah, that's kind of something.
That's good.
Wow, she's
That's
only
our
17.
Daughter. That's our daughter.
Let's all go home and
We
just
did-
let her
we
do
did-
the podcast.
We did something right. There have been many days when we've looked at each other and said, what did we do wrong? But then there's great moments and you say, well, we did.
I don't take any credit. I'm like, I
It's
used to
the
pray
grace of
that
God.
God would raise, godly children in our home in spite of me because I fail often. And what's really cool about me and Lacey's relationship now, she's 17 and I'm learning a lot from her. And, sometimes I just ask her, like, what could I have done different? Where did we go wrong sometimes? And she's very honestly kind. And I've learned so much from her lately that hopefully I will employ with the other three as they are still growing up. She's almost grown, but she is wise beyond her years, and I think she gets that from her dad.
Oh,
but
you're smarter.
Anyway, but yeah, I just look at that completely as the grace of God and the answer to a lot of prayer, just countless hours of prayer over the kids.
Now, there have been times balancing because everything gets back to Dad. That's always my joke, especially around here. But I think everybody feels that way. I mean, I asked you a question. I said, well, let's take one of your friends in the youth group whose parent teaches or works at the school. Don't you think he feels like he's in a fishbowl to some degree? Don't you feel like they also would say, yeah, I mean, my mom's always up there and knows everything. I think everybody feels like they're in a fishbowl everywhere. I've never heard anybody not say that. When we used to live in this small town in Texas, and it was like 40,000 people, they'd say, oh, this small town, everybody knows everything. And when I used to teach at SBC, the kids would say, I'm so sick of this school. Everybody knows everything. You can't do anything without everybody knowing. But people say that about everything, anywhere you are, because people talk. So it doesn't matter if you're in New York City. People are going to know in your groups what's going on, right? But Lacey gets perturbed sometimes because I'll tell her things that I've heard, and she'll say, how do you know that? And I'll say, everything gets back to me.
Something else I'll say about the whole topic of, like, everyone feels like they're in a fishbowl, and it's hard because you think you have control over what other people think, and you have to come to the realization that you don't, and that control over what they say, what they see, what they think is not owned by you, and you really have no control at all. And something that I learned in our IMS class that Dr. Mackey was talking about, he said, control is an illusion. And that was so powerful to me. I was like, he's so right. I can't control what other people experience of my life. I can only control what I do with it. Self-control is the only real form of control that I can have. And so I think that's what I have been putting that's become a focal point in my life, is figuring out how to correctly exhibit biblical self-control and learning how to do that instead of focusing on what everyone else thinks or says, because I can't control that. And only God can control that, and just just stop caring about what they think or say, because it's not going to be beneficial to you. What you have to think about and focus on is your relationship with Christ, and whether the things that you're doing are going to be glorifying to him, and whether your self-control, because your self-control will ultimately speak for you in that way of like other people seeing you as a Christian. And so I think that's become something, because I've never thought of, I think when we think of self-control as a fruit of the Spirit, we think of it as controlling our anger, but it's so much more than that. And I looked it up. I was researching on biblical self-control the other day, and it literally, the definition of it was like moderation and balancing different aspects of your life, and basically self-discipline. And so I just think that's something more important than listening to what other people have to say, because you're right, everyone does feel like they're in a fishbowl, because things do get around and people do talk, but you can't control that. You have to control your reaction to it and focus on your self-control in that area. So yeah.
Ooh, you needed to hear that, Mark.
I needed to hear it. I hear you.
You did.
Yeah. You know, Eleanor Roosevelt said, you could add this to all that.
Mm-hmm.
She said, it's attributed to her, that she said that people can only humiliate you if you allow them to.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you allow them to embarrass you,
Mm-hmm.
or you let them have they're going to laugh at you or whatever, but just be strong enough to not let that affect you. They can only humiliate you if you allow it.
Absolutely. I think that attends to so many different aspects too, like not just humiliation, but if you let other people's influences affect your life, it can, like if you compare yourself to other people, that's a good example. It's just, if you allow other people's influence to affect you, it can hurt your life in so many ways. You have to just not allow that. You have to be stronger. You have to be the bigger person. You have to be above reproach for all those things. And you have to just honestly just stop caring about it and focus on the one who you need to know. The person, you need to focus on Christ, and you need to focus on the person who ultimately you should care about knowing you the most. So
Savannah, I think, is bored. Are you bored, Savannah? She's making eye looks and sticking her tongue out at me.
She needs some.
What do you think, Savay? Okay.
that was really good.
Do you feel like you live in a fishbowl? Do you know what that means?
Yeah.
I think she relishes.
I know she
in
loves
the
it.
fishbowl.
She enjoys
loves
it. I
She
bet.
loves it.
She
Yeah.
would like a YouTube camera on her
24/7.
24/7.
She would. Yeah.
Absolutely.
She's a little influencer.
That's the generation I think she's growing up in anyway.
Can I just say what she said when you went live the other day,
wow.
showing
She
the
was in the
damage to the
background.
sanctuary?
Oh, right.
And she was standing beside you, and you pulled it up, and people were commenting, and she said something like,
This was a joke.
it was a joke, but it was funny. She said, no one's even commented on how cute I am standing beside you.
Everything you'd say, she'd be like, mm-hmm.
And when I made the comment, because we had a huge ice breakage pipage leak. I mean, it was pretty extensive, and I said, okay, I'm going to go live and just explain, because a lot of people were saying we'll come up and help, and I wanted to just address Service Pro is here, thank you for your help. And Savannah said, I want to be in it with you. And so the whole time she's right there to my left in the camera. So you're something else. She likes the fishbowl and God's grace.
She loves her daddy too.
She does.
She
And I
loves
love
her daddy.
I love her. I love all of you. So let me address one other thing. Well, I tell you that all the time. I've told you that.
I know.
She does. He tells us probably too
I
much.
appreciate that, though. I like that he
When
says
Lacy
it.
was little, she would say, why do you tell me all the time you love me? And I would say, because I don't want you to ever forget.
Which is sweet.
And you tell me probably 10, 20 times a day. It's funny, some friends and I had a joke. I wonder if you can ever beat him to saying it first, because I feel like you literally say it every time we're in the same room together. And so I kind of took the challenge, and I tried to beat you saying I love you first. And it was actually really difficult, but I did it once or twice. But
Well, that way when I'm dead and gone, you won't have to wonder.
we will not
You'll
have
know.
to wonder.
Yeah.
We feel
You'll say,
very
"We know."
loved.
Well, also, this is kind of random, but the other day I was cleaning out my drawers, and me and Dad's relationship kind of grew apart for a few years, but we're kind of getting back. I like going to coffee with you, but
When we moved, that was a hard moment in our lives, moving here, was very difficult, more than anybody will realize. And that's not a slight. It was. And our relationship suffered.
Yeah. But I was cleaning out like this little drawer or whatever, and I found a Valentine's Day card that he had given me, and he wrote in it. I literally was crying. I was like, this is so sweet.
I'm so glad you still love me.
Because like I didn't even remember getting that, but it was just like, it was so sweet. I was like, he's such a good example for future husband and stuff. So.
Well, I'm thankful.
Well, both of our girls have said that today, and we did not tell them to say that.
No, and I thought they would say, I don't want anything to do with my dad when I'm older.
No, but it's like, and you're funny and you're goofy, but I think...
And they don't like that sometimes.
No, well, yeah, because sometimes it adds to the fire. If like Landon and Micah are going crazy on game night and he's just laughing at them, then they just get crazier, and I'm just like, I can't right now. I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
Game night does get pretty crazy in the Livingston home.
I'm just trying to play Monopoly.
It
Don't
doesn't
bend the
matter.
cards.
It's gonna be, my big thing is don't bend the cards.
So like we'll like just like pull that out randomly. We'll be like, don't bend the cards.
And now we'll be playing a dice game, and we're like, don't bend the card.
Oh.
We just like say that randomly because he says that so much.
And our favorite games right now are Taco Goat Cheese
Taco
Pizza.
Cat
That is
Goat
a good
Cheese
one.
Pizza.
We fight the
It's actually
least
so
on that
fun.
one. We don't fight on that one. It's so much fun because it doesn't have any rules.
you, like,
I was thinking about that
slap
last
on-
night. There's like 0 rules
Slap
in
on
that
the
game,
table.
but it's just fun.
And it's fast paced.
It's very fast paced. That's better for our family.
One other thing just to note, and then we'll move on to the third thing, the blessings. But one thing I think the family has never had the luxury of, and I want to say this because I actually get irritated when Christians who are not in the ministry say this. My family's never had a choice on where they get to go to church. So if the youth group is bad, then they don't get the option. This is the youth group you have. You don't get to go down the road. You have to stay here. If the church is bad, it's just poor fellowship, poor, love and friendship, whatever, they don't get the option. This is the church that we're at. I feel like other church members, they have the option to walk out. They shouldn't because they're under covenant, but they have the option to just walk out. Well, we don't like the music. We don't like the preaching. We don't like the youth group. My kid can't get connected. And I'm like, well, my kid couldn't either. And, we moved here and made the decision we're going to leave everything that we held dear and had and the relationships and the roots. And I just get irritated because I think my kids did it. Your kids can do it. We have to do it. We don't have a choice. And maybe that's just the burden, the balance, right? Well, tough for you, Pastor. I don't know. What do y'all think? Because you don't get those luxuries. We've never had we've never, other than picking, God called us to go pastor this church. We don't get to pick anything else.
I feel like that's going to really build a lot of strength in them, though. Just learning, because I've heard you preach this several times about churches become very consumer driven, and it's all about catering to me instead of the biblical approach, which is where can I serve and how can I serve the people that, I'm covenanted with. And, so they've learned you don't just walk away. You don't just walk out every time something is not how you like it. And it kind of helps them think it's not about me anyway. It's about how I can serve this body. So I think that's a good thing, actually, that they haven't been able to choose.
I think I've enjoyed it. I think despite of the challenges and I know our youth group has been through a lot and we've been through some lows, and I got to a point where I'm the only junior girl. I'm the oldest girl in the youth group right now. There's no senior girls. I'm the only junior girl that comes every Wednesday. And so I know that was starting to get hard for me because it was I don't have a group here, because there are some guys, there's junior guys, but they're guys, That's all I gotta say about that. But I just needed some friends, and I started praying. I was like, God, please give me people. And I think God really, he respects when we stayed, that we don't leave every time there's a problem. And I know this was just so random, but I went on this trip super last minute, a youth trip that we had to Branson, and I made some really great friends, and they're a grade younger than me, but I just see I now have them in the youth group, and we just continue to get closer, and I just know that's going to be a really good thing for me, because that's my Sunday school class, but we weren't really close before that. And I also think it's cool how we have seen the highs and the lows, and we get to be there for both. We didn't just leave when everything was at a low. Like, you get to experience the lows of it and grow closer with these people and make meaningful relationships with these people in the lows, and then come out on the top when God like provides and brings you back to a high in the faith and all of that, and you get to be there for that too. And I think we've made some really meaningful relationships here at this church as well, and I think that's because you've been there for the highs and the lows. And so yeah.
I definitely think that the move here and like adjusting to a new church was easier on me because I'm younger, and it was definitely harder on Lacy from what she just described. She was the only junior. She didn't have any friends. I definitely think it was easier on me, though, especially in, like, school and stuff, because all I have to do is, like, especially, like, at my age, all we have to do is just, like, walk up, say hey, and then you automatically have a friend, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
definitely
the Lord blessed you with, like,
a million
7 or
friends.
8 other little girls who are all your age at the church.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this whole group, and you guys are
bunch at
like the
school.
Spice Girls or something.
No, we're like
Spice
the...
You don't know what that is, the Spice Girls.
We're like the
the Dirty Dozen.
Broadway buddies. We're the Broadway buddies.
Okay, that'll work. Broadway
The
Buddies.
Broadway Baptist.
Hey, the
That's what we
original was
named
the
ours.
Broadway Bunch, and they're
Yeah, that's right.
still kicking, I guess.
One thing Lacy said, though, she said, you know, she didn't have the option to walk away, so she said, I prayed and I asked God. And when you have the option to walk away every time something gets bad, you really don't need God. You're taking care of it yourself. I'll find my own way. I'm going to use my own will. But she didn't have that option. And so remember when Life Action was here and they said, you know, often we try everything and then we get to that last resort and then we pray. And we have it backwards. We should pray first instead of exhausting all of our human options and efforts before we pray. So
Very good. Yeah, real quick, wife, what are some balances you've had to deal with as a wife? We talked about the kids, but what do you struggle with as a pastor's wife?
well, there's definitely some expectations on all of us. I remember the first time, you know, when we first got married, there was an expectation. I laugh about this now, but that I could sing and play the piano. The pastor's wife could always sing and play the piano at every church. And so, you know, I'd go into a church and we'd meet people and they're like, do you sing? And no. Do you play the piano? No. And I felt like I was immediately disqualified in their eyes to do anything spiritual. But over the years, you know, I mean, there's pressure there. There's expectations that I'm going to serve, that I'm going to teach or use my gifts, which, I mean, every believer should be doing that. But I don't know, even maybe not here now, but over the years I've struggled even with, you know, what I wear to church on Sunday morning. Some ladies in the church, I don't know if you remember this, they've made comments on what I'm wearing, whether that looks like something a pastor's wife should wear.
And you always dress. Your big motto is modesty.
Yes.
So let's be very clear about that for anybody that would go, well, what was she wearing?
No, it was like pants. Like, I mean, in Texas, there were a group of older ladies, and they did not think the pastor's wife should wear pants at all under any circumstances. They always had to wear a dress on Sunday morning to church when they went
Or
up
Sunday night.
Or Sunday night.
Which we would bring in the babies, and Sunday night was kind of more casual, and you might come in and not sweatpants or anything like that, but you might come in what?
Jeans and a
Or
t-shirt.
jeans and a
Shirt.
nice shirt or something, and they would make comments. Oh my gosh. And it was funny because one lady, she could not believe you had never read the Baptist newspaper that was out, and you had never heard of the Women's Missionary Auxiliary.
Right.
And she was like,
What is that?
And Amanda just innocently was like, well, I don't know, what is that? And the woman went in the hallway and said, you don't know what the Women's Missionary Auxiliary is? And Amanda's like, well, no, I don't know. Should I? You know, and just ridiculous.
Well, and she
silly
wanted
thing.
me to come to a luncheon, and I mean, I understand, and it's such an honor that people, you know, want me to be involved in their groups outside of church. And when I didn't work, you know, it was a lot easier to do that. Now that I have a full-time job, to try to help
And you teach
support
at the school.
Teach at the school, teach Bible. You know, my time is more limited, and as we've talked about recently, the older our kids get, the more time is stretched between them and their activities. When they were little, they were just all home all the time, and we were always together. And we're definitely feeling the strain and that separation as they're all going in different directions as they get older. But so I feel like I'm not able to meet all of the demands that people would like for me to do. But again, there's that balance, and I've told you several times, I can do all of that, but I'm going to have to, not work. So we just have to prayerfully consider each year,
Because I want you to always be by my side and do everything I'm doing, and you're willing to do it. And to your credit, you've always served in the church, but typically you would serve either in children's ministry or youth ministry. And you've continued doing that. You teach a Sunday school class.
Right.
And I look at your teaching over on North Point as service to what I'm doing, because I feel like it's an extension of my ministry. You're over there. Those are all good things. But I selfishly want you to be at every senior saints luncheon and every meeting I go to where wives are, people, you can bring your wife. And I'm like, well, she teaches all day long. And I would love to do that, but I just can't. And so a lot of times I'm going by myself or, whatever, but that's kind of been our struggle. But it's just, you're doing ministry. You're not just out there, doing other things. It's always ministry.
It is. And I do love my job at the school. I never taught Bible as an academic subject before, and I've just kind of had to find my way through that and just develop just a passion for it and a deep love for it. I also love just being a part of where my kids are. Sometimes there are negatives to that because, they don't always want me to be a part of everything. But I think there's benefits too, so that's a balance. But I have 2 of my kids in my Bible classes this year. Both the boys are currently in my Bible classes, and it's just a really neat thing to get to teach Bible to your kids in a school setting. So, I am where I am right now, and Lord knows, where that's going to lead, but definitely requires some more time and energy than
And you also have to balance. You have to be my cheerleader, right?
I do have
so
to
you
be
have
your
to tell me,
cheerleader.
because you wanted to address that, because that's what letting people deep into our world.
Yeah, one thing, and again, I see the beauty of marriage here, where God brings you somebody who is going to kind of complement your weaknesses with their particular strengths. And Mark has way more strengths than I do, and I have way more weaknesses. But
I don't believe that. I don't think that's accurate.
Well, one area that I have more of a strength is just kind of, worrying about what other people think. And
you are impervious. Like, she doesn't, if people leave the church, she's like, well, we didn't need them anyway. Count it, God's, in a good way. She'll say it in a nice way. She'll say, that's God's will. And, trust the Lord on that. And I'm like, but we lost sheep. We lost part of the pastor or whatever. Or if there's criticism, she'll say, well, we did what we could do, and I did what God commanded me to do. And like, you're impervious to it. And me, I'm over here taking it all personal.
Right.
And she has to kind of tell me it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or you're just going to have to. And so she tends to be the stronger one there in that particular arena and area. And I tend to be, emotionally, because this about me. I can easily get dissuaded. Words have incredible power.
Right.
Over, to demotivate me or motivate me.
Right.
So when people say stuff, nobody's going to be there anyway. I'm totally demotivated.
Right. And where I try to help you is, 100 people can say something great, and then, 5 can have a negative outlook or whatever, or make a negative comment, and you're going to remember those 5, and they're going to dominate, your thinking. And so, and I don't know why we're different in that area. God just made us that way.
It's a compliment.
But I see, me coming in and saying, now wait, remember those 100? And I just kind of am drawn to the positive, and I have to just kind of help you recount like all the good things that are going on, so that you don't just drown yourself in those couple of negative things.
Because if I didn't have my dear wife, I would have quit a long time ago.
I do
I would have
believe
said,
that.
I'm done.
I believe
I'm
that.
done. This isn't worth it.
Yeah.
But it is worth it, and you always tell me you're being ridiculous. So she's always good like
In a
that.
kind way.
You're being ridiculous.
Well, I just help you get the right perspective. I think.
That's a good thing. I think
Yeah.
people need that. That's marriage. I help you on the law and grace side, and you help me on the encouragement side as a good cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like not in looks, but you're kind of like Bess Truman for Harry Truman. She would always have to tell him, "Come on, Harry, we're going. We're not putting up with this. We're leaving."
Well, if you remember, I think that's what made you start liking me. Do you remember this story?
Well, which one?
Well, so we didn't really know each other that well. We had met maybe one time, and you spoke in chapel, and I was teaching 4th grade. And
and I said,
okay, let me just preface this by saying that Mark was in a world of women who adored him and only told him the positive things. Like no one.
if only that were the case today.
That is the world you lived in, and you know it's true. He was this young, handsome, energetic Christian guy.
Yeah.
And so he came up to me after he spoke in this chapel service, and I mean, I could just tell he was, lay the compliment on me, lady. Cute new girl.
You're a little arrogant.
I could just
I
kind of
was
tell.
young.
And so he walks up and he goes, "Well, how do you think that went?" And I said, "Honestly, I feel like you were a little bit over their head. I'm not sure that they really connected with it. Like, I think it could have been a little more relatable to them. And like, it was like I busted a balloon and it just slowly deflated in front of my eyes. But at the same time, there was something about that he's told me over the years he was drawn to, because I was actually willing to tell him the truth, where a lot of people today in our world, they don't tell the truth. They lie, and they just tell people what they think they want to hear. And I mean, I've always been one to just nicely give my honest opinion about things. And I remember you telling me there was something about that was so intriguing to you that just drew you my direction after that.
Well, and you've said that in some ways it did that to you as well.
You did, the list.
Yeah.
That has been like my thing now.
This
like,
is
that
so
I do
good
that for me.
So he asked me to chaperone a mission trip. This is really when we kind of got to know each other, to Chicago. It was the home missions trip with the school. And on the way down there, I was at Broadway Baptist Church, and I was in the singles ministry there. And, we all had our list. I've told Lacy about this. And Savannah, the list when you're single at that age and you're looking for, someone to marry, you start writing down what you want in a guy. And so I had, 15 things on my list, because I was going to snag like the best Christian guy out there. And so Mark and I were talking as we were pulling out of the school parking lot. We just started talking. He sat in front of me, and I don't know how the list came up, but I said, "Oh yeah, I've got my list. I've got like 15 things on it." And he said something that cut me to the heart that I've never forgotten. I told my kids this, and I said, "What about you? What about your list?" And he said, "Well, I don't have a list for the girl I'm looking for. I have a list for myself and the qualities that I want to have for the girl that God brings to me one day." And I felt like such a stupid person.
I'm sure I read that somewhere and thought that's a good liner.
I felt kind of ridiculous.
No, I don't remember.
I just felt ridiculous in the moment, like, that is so much better than what I said.
Well, I knew I don't have any chance of getting married if I don't fix a lot of things in my life.
Oh, that was where really was at.
There's a lot of problems that I have. I don't need to be looking at anybody else. I need to be looking right here.
Well, and we all do, really. I mean, that was wise. And one thing about your dad, girls, and he told me this in 9th grade, he just felt impressed to pray for wisdom, and he started praying for wisdom regularly in 9th grade. And I can see that God has blessed him with that. It reminds me of Solomon asking for wisdom, and God graciously gave it. But your dad has navigated through so many situations and shown wisdom well beyond his years that is obviously God-given. and he needed it. He knew to start praying for it in 9th grade. He didn't know why, but in early 20s, he was going to need all that wisdom. And I see that in Lacy too. She has a lot of wisdom. So I don't know if you've been praying for it?
When I first started like getting deep in scripture, I read the book of Proverbs. I think I told you this the other day. But I started reading the book of Proverbs and really studying it. I spent a long period of time just like trying to understand, like fully understand the book of Proverbs. And one of the things it says so often, like very repeatedly, is pray for wisdom and discernment, because like it's very important for your life. And so I started doing that, and I think I still pray for that, and I hope it worked.
I can see it. In
All right. Well, real quick, we got to move on and wrap this up, but let's just quickly talk about blessings. So we're going to end on a positive. I think we've covered this a little bit, but blessings of being in a pastor's home. When you look back, what will be some of the things that girls and wife that you say, this was a good blessing? I'm glad I got to experience it.
Well, getting raised in a pastor's home was really good for us.
You're still being raised.
Well,
you're 11.
Well,
she's like, now that I'm on my own and, and a YouTube star.
I never said that.
I make my own
Okay, but
Wompity womp.
Being raised in a Christian home where we go to church every Sunday and we go to all the church events was really good for us, and it still is. I'm still being raised. It still is really good for us, because it just brings us closer to the Lord. Because I can't remember. Was it you or Mom who grew up not going to church and had to ride the bus?
That was me. Yeah.
My dad had to ride the bus to church because his parents didn't take him. And
they weren't very faithful.
I'm just glad that we are raised in a Christian home and that we get taken to church every day. Not every day, but every Sunday and Wednesday.
It's pretty much every day you're up here.
Actually, I'm pretty sure I'm here every day. And even on Saturdays, I'm still up here doing something.
Well, you know Miss Tony Manley. She has a son, Josh
I love
Manley.
her. I literally love her.
Yes, and Josh, who's a pastor in United Arab Emirates, he made the comment to me when he came home. He said, literally, my entire family, my brothers and I, we lived on that campus for 18 years of our life. And I told him, that is exactly the way my family is right now. This is our world. We live on this campus. And you're growing up on, you're going to look back and say, I literally grew up there, right there.
Yeah. I think the most important thing I loved about still getting raised in a pastor's home is just the example. And I think I've seen that, seen even more how much of an example you guys were and are.
And sometimes we're an imperfect example.
Yeah, but I think
I've lost my temper at times in the house, and I've had to come back to you guys and say, will you forgive me?
But you always did that. So that's an example in itself.
That's an
but just y'all's example and how we can try to do that in the future and become godly parents one day and just live out our callings and how to deal with certain situations. Y'all have always been there for that and been very good examples despite the hardships.
That's so encouraging. All right, I'm going to ask a weird question to end. Okay. Unless, wife, you want to chime in?
Well, I always think about a friend of ours in Texas, and she told me, I just can't listen to my husband preach because I just hear his voice all the time, and I can't separate that, and I fall asleep during the sermon.
She literally did. She would fall asleep on the pew.
Godly woman.
Presbyterian. That explains a lot.
But she, and I didn't realize until that moment. I have now been listening to you preach for 20 years.
And you came from Adrian Rogers.
I came from Adrian Rogers, and I love John MacArthur. Love his preaching, but I love your preaching. And I have not gotten tired of it. I have never even wanted to drift off during it.
And
obviously,
you know that if you do, you'd be a sermon illustration.
Exactly.
Oh,
No.
yeah, you
I mean, there's obviously, I think some of your, series and sermons have been better than others, and I'm always pretty honest with you,
Very.
even if you.
And sometimes I don't like it.
Sometimes you don't like it.
She's
but,
like, well, and I'm like, yeah.
but
okay.
What?
That's exactly.
but I will say whenever you're off, which is very, very rare, and maybe we're on vacation and we go to another church, I always leave so thankful that I have to hear your preaching every Sunday, because it's good, and God uses it in my life. Even though you're my husband, you're my pastor, and God speaks to me through you weekly. And I mean, I've gotten to hear some of your very best sermons just in the past year or two that you've done. Obviously, certain ones stand out. I've always told you Esther stands out, Romans stands out, Genesis stands out, but Jonah, wow, that one caught me off guard and
taught me
kind of
something
rocked my
new.
world. So
Yeah,
Well,
that was good. I really
it caught me off guard.
Oh.
I honestly thought, well, I'm just going to do a quick little sermon series in the summer, and I didn't really plan on it, and I felt like the grace of God for our church and our people was all over it in ways I can't even explain. Like, I don't think John is as good as Jonah. I mean, I don't know why. It just is. But anyway,
Well,
I love what you said, and I love you. Thank you.
job.
I do.
See, I love you. I said it.
Yeah.
so
I didn't beat you
sweet,
to
guys.
it. I did say I love your preaching, and
Yes.
and I love you
Well-
too. But
Well, that's so kind.
Anyways.
Well, that's encouraging. Thank you, wife, and I love you, and I always love your ministry and what you do, standing by my side, and of course, I love you, girls, and the boys, the dirty boys. Let me ask you this on a closing note. If you got to think about this, and be careful what you say. But
Oh, what is this question?
Yeah.
don't be too transparent.
Well, I know we try to watch what we watch, but if you had to compare our life to a movie or a TV show, what would it be? Like if you said, my life compared, what would it be?
TV shows are obviously very fake.
Oh. It's not what I was going to say.
It's just like an analogy.
Okay,
I know.
Just for fun.
I would say this is just the first thing that came to my mind was like Full House or something like that. We're just like
Okay.
kind of not in like a worldly way, but in the aspect of like there's just always something going on, and it's kind of funny, and like sometimes we're just like a big family, and sometimes me and mom joke like if someone says something funny to someone else and their facial expression is just so funny, we're like, oh, there's the camera, there's the reality TV show camera on
we
your
have
face.
our
'cause
secret reality show TV.
we just think
our
we're
heads.
funny in our heads. Funny enough to have a reality TV
We
show.
are.
Okay. Would you've watched some little shows? What about like Zach and Cody or what's
Zach
the
and Cody.
Tiki Waka or whatever?
Kiki Waka.
What was
What
that?
in the
What was
world?
that?
Tiki.
Camp Kiki
Camp
Waka.
Kiki.
Yeah,
Okay.
what-
That does not really relate to our family.
Okay.
Wait,
I
I'm
would
trying to
say-
think more.
I would
modern.
say Nikki, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn. It's just a bunch
There
of
are
crazy.
4 of y'all.
There's
Hey,
four.
that's a good one. Yeah.
There's 4, and they're all crazy, and they get in fights every day, and they
Oh,
cause a lot of
But they
problems.
make up and love each other.
They make up and love each other,
Yeah.
and the dad's a little crazy,
Yes, he is.
Oh,
and
somebody
the
got
mom
called
is
out.
like trying to like organize the dad.
Yeah, that's
and
probably
it's
a good
just
one.
a
That's
very,
probably a
it's
good one
very
for
good.
us. What would you say, wife?
When Lacey was born and I was a stay-at-home mom, I watched Everybody Loves Raymond, that
Oh,
whole series.
That
I'm pretty sure we
was-
still have DVDs.
And
We
we
do.
do. And oh my goodness, I just thought this is us being, living this out. Mainly just the husband and wife and how the communication is hilarious. And then the mom and the dad.
was my mother.
Hey,
The mom, Marie, was
Yes,
my mother.
Yes, she was your mom, and the dad on there was a lot like your dad. It was just hilarious to watch that.
So everybody
Y'all,
loves
I just
Raymond.
remembered the movie that perfectly describes our family. It's Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
Kid.
Oh.
No, specifically the long haul.
Yeah, the road trip.
Because they pull in the car. She's like, the mom's like, no devices. Here's your lunch. We're not eating McDonald's.
Yeah,
and then like
that
all this stuff
We
goes
got
wrong.
food
That
at
is
home.
like so perfect. Like the mom and the dad in
Yes.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid and
Yeah.
the kids. Like
Well, and
it's
I
just
also
so
and
thought
he gets
funny.
caught
Roderick-
on his phone, remember?
Yeah, and then the kid comes in and he's like, "Mom's gonna go ballistic. Get out here right now!" And they pull up at the motel and they're like, "It's time to go in the hot tub." And there's this man in there like eating Cheetos.
That is our
That's
life
our
story.
movie.
That
That
really
is the
is.
movie. We've always said that too.
We
Well,
have.
every Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
Yeah, all of them.
Roderick Rules.
Roderick,
That- Or what was the one where they went to the swimming pool all summer?
That's the dog days.
That's
one,
the
I
dog
think.
Yeah,
day.
that
We need to
one-
watch one of those
that one
tonight.
too.
Is that
was-
where
Yes, we
they
do.
get the big roast and the dog eats it? That has
Yes,
happened.
that's
That has
it,
happened
that's
at our house. Remember when
Yes,
Bella ate the
Bailey-
baked spaghetti?
No, it was Bailey.
This was in Texas.
No, it was Bailey.
Well, anyway.
She
So,
got it
yeah,
off the counter.
I would agree. A lot of the Diary of the Wimpy Kid stuff is pretty spot on with who we are.
Yes.
That one's good.
Yeah, for me, this is going to make us sound more important than we are, and that's not the intention. But I love.
Is it presidential?
Well, it's
I feel like it's about-
kind of
definitely about a president.
You know, I love to read presidential and historical and that kind of thing, but I really identified with season 3 of The Crown, which was Netflix series, because kind of the things that
My queen.
no, the things that the
You
things
say
that,
you're the
I'm the princess.
I feel like I'm the
joke.
queen.
I'm the
So-
princess.
but just the things that they
Me
went
too.
through.
Me too. Girl.
Like when all the
No.
people died
I'm
in the landslide, and the prime minister said, you need to go see them. And the queen was like, well, do I need to go? And pastors deal with that whole scenario constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the right thing to do? What's the optics? Do I need to go? How do I need to do this? And then the one where he is struggling with identity, the one on the moon, and he's trying to find significance, and he it's just all of that. I just related so well with that season, and I thought, boy, a lot of these issues are issues, believe it or not, pastors face, and no one would understand that. And in our context, I feel like there definitely is two like forms of government that we're dealing with constantly, the balance between the side of the school and the balance with this side, and how do we handle that. And anyway, that's just my philosophical. We're not that important, and we're not crown people.
Wait,
but,
as long as I'm the queen, you can use that illustration.
okay, well, you
All
can,
right.
you can be the queen.
Well, everybody go watch Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Long
Yeah,
Call
that's probably
tonight.
the better movie.
Yeah.
That
it's
one
probably
is just,
better.
it's too perfect.
Okay.
It's so funny and down to earth.
Speaking
like,
of
that's
road
real.
trips, but one time I remember we were on a road trip at
Oh,
this
no.
beach house. We were at this beach house, and Lane we were like packing up our stuff, and we loaded everything in the car. And Lane was like,
that's right.
Lane was like, I'm gonna go download my movie, and so we all got in the car. We didn't know he was downloading the movie, and so we started driving.
He
and
was
then
up in the bedroom.
He was
Oh
up
my
in the
gosh,
bedroom
I
downloading
remember
his movie, like charging his iPad or whatever.
And we
I
drove
buckled
off.
him in. I buckled him in, and
then
we
he,
were
like, ran away.
loading up, and he said, "Oh, I can't get Wi-Fi here." So he unbuckled himself, ran back up to the house, and we left because the cleaning people
And
were
then-
there, and we were running late, and we didn't want to be
Micah-
charged.
Micah, he was like, wait, where's Landon?
Well,
and
halfway
the
down
car,
Screeched
the car
to a
went
stop. We pulled over.
Maybe a little overreaction there on Mark's part because
That was crazy.
he almost flipped us.
Well,
Yeah,
we
we like-
got halfway down the road, and I realized we left a
Well,
kid.
Micah realized.
Yeah,
Micah
we
was like,
didn't
wait,
even
where's
know. We were
Landon?
like,
It's too
also
quiet.
probably- yeah, we were like, it's too
There's no
quiet.
fighting.
And we were ocean front, so my fear was like
He went to the
that
He
he
went looking.
we didn't because we didn't know at that point where he was. But how old do you think?
Well, that was weeks before we came to Broadway
Yeah,
and View
so
of a
he
Call.
was old enough to not.
So
like,
he
wasn't a toddler.
That was 2020. That was
Yeah.
July 2020, and but that was a litany of things he did. He
Well, we-
got lost in Magic Kingdom,
On purpose.
Disney World on purpose.
Yeah, he
and-
wanted.
When
to.
we got back, he didn't even know we were gone. He was with the housekeeper lady, and this was maybe 5 minutes total in leaving and coming back. Probably not even that long. And he was just hanging out with the housekeeper lady, and he thought it was all funny. As he
Makes sense
does.
for him though.
Yeah,
He's like
he
that.
likes a good adventure.
So I'm always trying to keep up with him. Well, thank you for being on the program, Savannah. I know you loved it. Lacey, thank you for opening up. Love, thank you for being here and supporting me. I love you all. And on that note, we will call it quits for Footnotes. Until next time.
Adios, amigos. Goodbye.
Go watch Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yes,
Tonight.
and Nikki, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn.
And that's another episode of our podcast, Footnotes. We drop our podcast each Friday, so be sure to tune in, check us out, and listen. Footnotes is a ministry of Broadway Baptist Church located in Southaven, Mississippi. We're located right outside of the Metro Memphis area. You can learn more about us by visiting us online at broadwaychurch.org. Until next time, it's Footnotes.